Hello, and welcome to another episode of Roots and Hoots, a podcast project produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. Since 2020, we've been gathering, laughing, learning hard truths, and sharing in community conversations with Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. Each episode, we learn something new, and we're excited to be sharing this journey with you. Roots and Hoots is about connecting with and celebrating Indigenous peoples' contributions to their fields of study, work, and cultures. We also speak with allies who share how they are furthering the work of reconciliation in Canada. To learn more about the Legacy of Hope Foundation and the work that we do, please visit legacyofhope.ca.
Hello, and welcome to this special podcast episode done in celebration of Indigenous History Month. This episode will feature some of the great voices over the last 5 years of the Roots and Hoots podcast, guests who are celebrating Indigenous peoples and cultures and furthering reconciliation across our country. Roots and Hoots is a podcast project produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. Please enjoy and feel free to comment on the Legacy of Hope Foundation's socials to let us know which guests you'd like to hear from next on the Roots and Hoots podcast. Is there anything that you hope people take away from the podcast?
Well, the main thing I hope our podcast will achieve is that people walk away from hearing this podcast is that, there are good people out there, Indigenous people out there that are doing good things and are doing great things and have achieved a lot and, have experienced interesting things in life, and that, we're trying to change the stereotype image of Indigenous people that that have been around since colonialism started. And so my great ambition to see is to change the perception that people have of Indigenous people, and for them to walk away knowing and understanding more about Indigenous people. That's what I'd like to see. Yes, Sean, it's good to have you, and thank you for doing this.
Absolutely.
It's always good to talk to people from Manitoba, especially.
Thank you.
You also recently collaborated with Ellen Gabriel from Kanasatagi on her book titled "When the Pine Needles Fall: Indigenous Acts of Resistance." Can you please tell our audience about this book and how it came to be and important message it delivers?
This book in particular for me, is something that I'm very proud of. I learned a lot as a result of my relationship with Ellen, which is ongoing. She inspires me with her hope for a better world, and I feel very lucky to be able to share those conversations with others.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually, we come from an oral tradition where, back in history, not a lot of people wrote books about, things they've encountered, and how like today's day and age, there's more, more opportunities and more ways of covering our histories. And how has in being with Alan Gabriel and helping her write the book, how has it changed your perspective about Indigenous people or Mohawks specifically, or how have you changed, being involved in that collaboration?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I think, Kim Tallbear, Indigenous Studies scholar at the University of Alberta, always talks about that research with Indigenous people can be transformative, right? That there's this element of standing with, allies with other people, and how that can transform people. And for me, I learned a lot about Haudenosaunee culture, history, philosophy, the importance of oral storytelling as a way of conveying important pieces of that history, of that culture. I learned a lot about Mohawk language and the kind of deeply grounded nature of diplomacy and thoughts on treaty. Ellen helped me understand in a very, in a very humble way how destructive some of that thinking is, and how Mohawk approaches to the world actually have a lot to teach everyone about the ways forward, about ways to reconnect and rebuild relationships, not just between people, but between species, between all our relations. And I think that is important. That's something that I learned a lot by collaborating with Ellen on, and I think is the reason why I feel so proud to have been part of this project of uplifting Ellen's voice, because those are the teachings that we need in this world right now.
In this compilation of episodes, this is really, unfortunately, we can't include all of them. There's so many good ones in our podcast that I wish we could have, somehow, included them all, but there's just too many. And I'm glad it's you that picked them and not me, because I would, would have a hard time with that. And it's actually a good timing to do this, because June 21st is National Indigenous Day, and when you think about how much through these podcasts I'm able to reflect on the history of Indigenous people and how far we've come, considering we were colonized and had to endure, colonization, and hopefully those chains and the colonization, that part will eventually shed from our lives, and but this podcast on June 21st should always be remembered as Indigenous Day, and that people should take some time to learn a little bit more about Indigenous people. We have so many languages, so many different Indigenous people communities across Canada, and they're all unique, in one way or another. Even if there's several Cree communities in one area, they're all unique, and people really should take the time to know Indigenous history, and also be friends with somebody you don't know, or make an effort to. If you don't have an Indigenous friend, you should make an effort to meet one, and become friends, and and you'll have a better understanding about Indigenous culture and how people are.
So you see, there's all these things that have disrupted the roles of Indigenous people that we once knew, and what gave us balance in our communities. So for me, I have the teaching that everyone had something strong to contribute, and everyone was necessary for the whole circle. Like you said, the whole community, the whole nation's input about what was better or what was good for the community. And we were taught chiefs were just echo makers. They weren't the leader, the political person. They were merely someone that was appointed by their community or nation to bring whatever decision the community had come to collectively. They would appoint this chief to go be an echo maker. So he would echo what was told by his people to other communities. And that was the teaching that I was given. So as you can see, like I spoke about the youth, the adolescents were warriors, or strongly contributing to doing the work, and the women as caregivers, and men as providers and hunters, and then the elders and knowledge keepers and seniors. So there was an intrinsic and important role for everyone. But unfortunately, because of all of the colonial acts of oppression that disrupted those roles, we're in the situation that we are today, where people are returning to their language, returning to their culture, returning and finding their families. So many people have been displaced. So many of our traditional languages, systems have been disrupted. So it's a return and a reclaiming, and are restoring to our balanced way of life, and doing that in a time where things are still chaotic and there's still disruption and there's still racism and all of that. So it's a work in progress. And that's why I always say, if there were a message I'd want to get to Canadians, what I would want to say to them the most, why I'm so passionate about educating people about the things that have happened to Indigenous people and continue to happen to Indigenous people. It's not 100 years old. These things are still happening. There's still children in care. We still have 115 communities without clean water. You still have communities living in poverty and third world conditions when we're a country as rich as Canada. We don't have the same levels of education as other non-Indigenous children have in their schools. The list is on and on. So the reason I'm so passionate about educating Canadians about that is because it gives them an understanding, it gives them a respect. If they learn Indigenous history, they see the value and contribution and amazing talents and contribution and foundation that Indigenous people have contributed to what is now Canada and what we continue to contribute, whether it's music, medicine, law, design, arts, any area. Indigenous people have made and continue to make a huge contribution.
After my year there, I told them that the powers that be, the vice principal of this teachers' college, that they were hiring teachers now. And I said, I want to go to Fisher River to teach. And no, they didn't think it was a good idea. They said, nobody should go to their home community to teach their first year. I said, well, I've already taught 2 years. I said, and I did this because I wanted to teach my own people. So anyway, I got the job at Fisher River. I even had my relatives in the program. It was a good 2 years. I'm still friends with most of them. A couple of the boys I had to be tough with, but they're my friends today. One of those boys is the father of the first medical doctor we had at Fisher River, and he's the grandfather of our first lawyer. The son is the lawyer, and then his first granddaughter is a medical doctor. So their grandfather learned a lot from me. Just kidding.
Well, Verna is an amazing woman. She was a teacher. She worked in Indian Affairs, and she was one of the first people to introduce language teachings, Indigenous language teachings in the school, and an introduction to the teachers that she was working with. She is from Fisher River. She lives in Vancouver now. She was an associate professor there, and she's just a wonderful person that I've really had the pleasure to do some work with over the years. I wanted to ask you what Elijah was like during that time. He was always such a friendly person. His personality was, always friendly and welcoming, and such a gentleman. That's what I describe him. Being under so much pressure in the Canadian spotlight, the media there all the time. What was it like at that time, like being around him? What was he like? What was the atmosphere like? And it must have been pretty charged atmosphere, probably quite intense. Describe that period and what was like living that moment or those days.
Yes, I came on in September after the Meech Lake Accord, after everything had happened. But of course, I was there, our outside the ledge, and it was quite a time in history because it brought every First Nation in solidarity for one cause that we are taking pride in ourselves. It lifted up our spirit. It brought all our nations together across Canada. So everyone felt proud. It was an amazing feeling. So when I started with Elijah in September, I remember going into his office, the first floor of the legislative building to your left, and I went to the office there were boxes, and they have cathedral ceilings in the ledge. The boxes were to the ceiling. There was no pathway. I almost cried. Those were letters from across Canada and the world in support of his position that he took to stand up and speak up for First Nations people, that we are the original peoples of this country, yet we were not consulted or considered in the amendments that they were trying to make in the Meat Lake Accord. So when I started with him, I was marveled at how much he could function under pressure. There was tremendous pressure in the ledge, pressure from other governments. There was threats. There was threats on his life. He had to go into hiding, and he had security. But when I started and started working for him, the invitations were outstanding. I don't think any other leader had those type of invitations and letters and inquiries, because he was global, national icon that everyone wanted for him to speak. But he still had to maintain his duties as an NDP member of the Legislative Assembly. So he had a double duty, but he really was one of the most kindest, down-to-earth individuals I have ever known. I've witnessed him in intense meetings that I would have crawled out of, but he composed himself, maintained his composure, because he spoke the truth all the time. He always made reference to our land, the treaties. We are entrenched in the constitutions. We are people of the land. We care for the land. We are the first peoples of our land. So he really always reiterated that in a lot of meetings. He stuck to the point, even though it was difficult things to say, and the tension you could cut with a knife. He always remained composed. He was never nervous. And I was always amazed at that. But when he was angry, whenever he did get angry at someone, which was rare, I wouldn't want to be the person on the other end, because rarely was he ever angry. He always was for the youth. He was always talking about what it meant to be a leader. Our community members vote in a leader. And that's what you got to look at when you see the leaders of a community. They have a tremendous weight on their shoulder. They have tremendous responsibilities. He always spoke up for that. And the youth. He always maintained that you're a leader in your own right as a youth. He always spoke up for the importance of maintaining your connection to the land, to exercising and practicing your hunting and fishing rights, and going out into your traditional territory. He goes, never forget about the land where you come from. And he always made a point. Every September, he went into his traditional territories in Red Sucker Lake for a week, or 2 weeks. That's how he grounded himself. And he always got a moose. I don't know how the guy did it, but he would always come back to Ottawa after his holiday, be refreshed. He'd be ready to fight. And while I'm talking about, I'm just realizing how honored I was and privileged to work for such an individual.
Yeah.
But Karen lives in Fishing Lake, and she does culture days, and she's been organizing women's retreats on her land, and she also does like bush survival skills and ice fishing. We really like to do net fishing in particular. And yeah, that's where I go to work on moose hides when I'm in town, and yeah, she does like a really beautiful job as well of like medicine picking and like just a strong understanding of the homelands.
Yeah. That's kind of like relearning culture for the young people anyways, revitalization of their cultures.
Yeah,
There's
definitely.
a lot of that going on across Canada. I find, like, the resurgence of cultures and culture camps and language revitalization.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I love working on hides, like I said. And so, even like yesterday, I was taking some of the youth out and we are working on a deer hide that we have. And even though we're all from different places, because we live here in Ottawa, some of us, like myself, I'm Métis, and then we also have some OG Cree and some Inuit, and we're all coming together in this urban Indigenous environment to work on this hide together. So I find that those land-based skills and learning, it's really building community in a
Yeah.
really strong way.
Yeah, she's been working with elders and youth. She's a Métis, and she's a very bright young woman. A lot of ambition, and she's proven that by starting a store, a shop in the Byward Market, selling Indigenous wares, crafts, and paintings, and all kinds of stuff like that that are made by Indigenous people. And she started that, and she's done also. She worked on a conference with elders and youth, and quite an ambitious young woman. And I really have a lot of admiration for her.
You know, I don't really feel like Métis, especially in our family and the settlements, have really ever had their story truly heard. And so I think a lot of Métis, where I come from, we've normalized those experiences and we've been desensitized to violence. And so when I talk to my aunties about it, they say, "Oh yeah, that happened back in the day. It's okay.
Yeah.
That happened to us. It's okay." And I'd always try to remind them, like, no, it's not okay. Like, you deserve justice. And, like, I just try to reinforce like positive values about who they are because they're like such amazing, strong, Métis women.
You also had dog tags, they call them, numbers, e-numbers, that were given by the government of Canada, I guess. Everybody had a little tag with a number on it.
Yeah. Well, actually, our mothers kept those they had little holes on them. Mine was E31220. And I remember when CD, how the clinic ship that used to come once a year into our bay, we would be on there, and the doctors and the dentists would be calling out one E31220, E31227, or whatever. There was no mention of any names. And even in school, we would play games with each other and try to memorize everybody's numbers.
Uh,
We were just a number.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Ayaya songs are about our histories. Ayaya is an Inuit-owned firm that tells our stories in many languages across Canada. They are experts in publishing children's books, usually in syllabics, and they do large multi-language projects like the reports of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Commission. If you need help getting your stories into classrooms or homes in Cree, Inuktitut, or other Indigenous languages, check them out at ayaya.ca. That's ayaya.ca. Ayaya is a proud sponsor of the Roots and Hoots podcast. What would you say is like the method to how you've gone about contacting people?
well, it's really been mostly people that I know that I've known about over the years, and some have been referrals, but which is kind of what I'm I'm starting to lean more on referrals because I'm kind of running out of guests now, people that I know. But that'll never end. There's always going to be somebody or out there that are willing to talk about and has some good things to say about their life. And it's really about the podcast is really about showcasing Indigenous people's achievements and talents, and wonderful things that they've done over the course of their lives, and interesting stories as well, hardships in there as well. And so it's been really a learning experience for me as well. Hello and good day. Welcome to this podcast episode of Roots and Hoots. I'm your host, Gordon Spence, and today my guest is filmmaker Shelley Niro from the Six Nations Reserve in Ontario, Canada. Yeah, we probably have some young listeners, maybe somebody who's getting into the film business, such as someone like you, young person, or any artist, and in whatever field they may be heading into in terms of their work. What kind of advice would you have for emerging artists today, and what stories or what advice can you tell
Um,
them?
yeah. I like to think that you can be an artist on any level, ground level, escalator level. I don't know, but you have to just get your materials and get the materials you can afford, and then um, just be independent. Be independent of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say. Um, hmm. And finish your projects. Go from one project, go to the next project. And sometimes you have to leave projects behind, but you can keep continuing. I just think it's important to keep working, because sometimes I've noticed that people get really kind of uh they lose their direction or even ambition, and I just think that you can't lose it. You just got to keep going, keep on track.
Yes, yeah,
Be excited about what you're doing. Be excited about what other people are doing too.
yes, yeah. Be an
Yeah.
inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're an inspiration yourself, and you got a really good ability. You got a natural talent as a filmmaker.
The second one was the Peguis surrender in 1911, and I had I'm a history buff, and I when I used to go out and do stories, we did stories on the Peguis community, Peguis First Nation in Manitoba. They were always leading the march, for rights in the city of Winnipeg. They would march on Indian affairs and be on the bullhorn and everything else. So, and I knew Louis Stevenson, who was the chief at the time, and he was very another very amenable, very giving, and he was a grand chief as well of the chiefs. But so I said, what's behind? And I of course I knew, because I did the research at the it's called the TAR, Treaty on Aboriginal Rights Research, and so I knew the story. So I pitched it to CBC as a documentary, and basically looked at how the Peguis people were, how their land and their community and their exile was carried out by the Department of Indian Affairs, so that the settlers of the Selkirk area could take their land. So they took their land. They did not provide them any compensation. They just basically, through a fraudulent vote, when most people were out hunting, they paid the residents to vote to surrender the land, which they did not. So, and they called it the Peguis surrender of 1911. Anyway, so we went back, we interviewed the chief, we interviewed some of the people that were still alive from 1911 and what happened. And they took that story and they took it to court. They showed it in the court when they had for the land claim, for the compensation. Yeah. And the lawyer was, I think it was Doug McLeod, and it was Lloyd Stevenson was the lawyer. He was from Peguis, and they used that documentary in the court case, and they were compensated for over $150 million. So I was very proud of that. But at the time, it did win another Manitoba Human Rights Award, and I have it on my wall. Yeah. So very proud of those two stories, and for me, it just goes to show you that having an Indigenous person that is looking for those stories to help move the ledger, the envelope forward for our people is so important. It's so important that they be in those all white newsrooms, directing that. So I was very proud of those two stories.
It's not really it's not, it's kind of we try to do themes, like we did healing for a while, and then we did music, and so we try to do themes, but it doesn't always work out that way. So um, basically it's more of finding the people, and there's a lot of people out there that have done great things, and I don't think it'll ever end as long as there's Indigenous people living in Canada, here in Canada, and doing good things. I don't think it's ever going to end, because as life goes on in the Indigenous world, Indigenous people are becoming more and more strong, and more, taking control of their lives, and having more to say on how things happen and what things are done, and how they lead their lives. We no longer have residential schools. We don't have day schools and stuff like that that kind of control part or all of our daily lives. So we've kind of taken the shackles off those institutions and moved forward. So yeah, it's been good so far.
I wanted to, before I forget, and it's not on my list of questions, but I wanted to ask you, or maybe mention, talk a little bit about your brother. I met your brother, Gordon Morrisville, years ago when we were young, going to university in Brandon, and I was, an admirer of him, his character, and his personality, and just the wonderful person he was. Such a smart, good-looking guy, and he was very proud of his heritage. I could go on and on, but it was saddened me, and probably a lot of people, when he passed away several years ago. Maybe you could just, talk a little bit about him.
Well, my brother was, as you had said, he was very, very. He was my mentor. He was my mentor. He's the one that I never would have went to university. He's the one that said to me, he was at university. He was taking the program there, and I had just graduated from high school. And he said, "Well, why not come to university?" And I said, "Well, university, what's that? Like what do you do there?" I mean, that's how green I was. I mean, I was apprenticing to be a carpenter at the time, and he said, "Well, try it for a year," And I lived with him, but I never grew up with Gordon. Gordon was adopted out and believe me, these are strange stories, but he was adopted by a Dakota woman and her white husband, farmer husband. And basically what, back then, the people adopted Indigenous people to work their farms. I mean, so they were like indentured slaves. But through that Dakota woman, he learned the culture, and it became very cultural. And certainly at the time, there was a renaissance with Indian activism. The American Indian movement was in full swing. The Red Power movement was in full swing across the country. And we had Indigenous professors at the University of Brandon, right? I mean, so, it was a movement. So I learned, from him how to basically be proud of who we were, to be proud of being Indigenous, and to stay in school, and to take, that's where I did take journalism for the first time. So I was very, he was like my mentor. Gordon was full into academics, and you should read this, you should do this, you should grow your hair long. I mean, to grow my hair long. So you look at me and Gordon back in the day. We went from short haired Indians to long-haired braided men, and I remember the elder that had said to us, he was an elder for Indigenous people across North America, a fellow by the name of Philip Deere, and he said, I see one day where the people will grow their hair long once again and be proud of who they are, and it starts with you.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And so yeah, Gordon was very influential, and he had a hard life. I mean, he was adopted out, but the bond that we had together as brothers was amazing, and I really do miss him being around. Yeah.
The most part, I've always found that education is key. Education is the key that changed my life and helped me to go a totally different path. It was a big part of that journey in providing me safety, security, economic well-being, all because of education. So for me, I'm a big proponent, a big advocate for education, educating people to make change.
From the years that you started your career in the education field till today, what do you see the most significant impacts on Indigenous people has been over the years of your career?
I see a lot of change. I see going from zero to where we are today. For example, going from 20 teachers to thousands of teachers, going from nobody with PhDs to many with PhDs. People are clamoring for them for presidents of universities and all that, I'm just so proud of the advances that people are making. And I see all the way along that each generation is adding more. There's always more people. There's more of us. And we have to tackle everything from health and economic development and every aspect. We have to try to prepare our people. I always say if we're really going to be independent and on our own, we do have to have expertise in all of these areas. So, I spent my later years promoting access and support at higher ed.
Two notable guests also have been two of your children who've been on the podcast.
Yeah, we're extremely proud of Alice and Christian for their accomplishments as they're both lawyers now. Actually, Christian was Alyssa was first, and then Christian. It actually took him 2 or 3 times to apply to law school, to a bunch of law schools in Canada, and he got rejected. He's resilient, and he really wanted to be a lawyer, and that's always been his dream, as far as I can remember. Besides being a professional hockey player, I think being a lawyer was his second choice. We're extremely proud of him. We're proud of all our kids. As a young Indigenous person growing up in an urban environment, what were some of the challenges you had to overcome to get where you are now?
Well, looking back over my life as an Indigenous urban youth, I think, the two things that stand out for me was dealing with racism, at many points in my life. Growing up, I always knew I was Indigenous, but I think my parents did a great job at teaching us our cultural heritage. But at the same time, when you're a kid, in an urban setting, especially, all you want to do is fit in with the rest of your friends and try to be part of society in that sense. So, there was times where I experienced racism growing up, and I didn't really know why. To be honest with you, I didn't understand what my appearance had anything to do with or giving them grounds for putting me down, or for whatever reason that may be. I had a hard time grappling with understanding of racism early on, and being Indigenous and knowing where I fit in to society. So considering my family's history and what my parents went through, Now, both my parents went to residential school. My mother was part of the high Arctic relocation of the Inuit in the 1950s from Manitok all the way up to Grise Fiord, and the colonial effects that has had on them and their siblings and, my family in general. I saw it as a kid growing up. And at the time, early on, I didn't understand why things were the way they were, right? And coupled with racism too, and dealing with that whole perspective as an urban Indigenous youth, it almost came down to wanting to fit in more and not, I don't want to say not wanting to be Indigenous. It's because it's been something that I never really talked about before, but and I feel shame for feeling that as a youth. But as I got older, I realized the systemic roots behind these issues and why Indigenous people face the kind of things that they face with today, and the history with the federal government and all that stuff. So I see the colonial effects as to why it happened, and looking back on to what my parents had to overcome and all the barriers that they faced, it really brought me back a sense of pride to be Indigenous and to respect, their perseverance and adversity. I think, just dealing with racism and effects of colonialism and sort of loss of identity as an urban Indigenous youth was something that I definitely grappled with growing up. But, as you get older, you begin to understand more and more as to why these things are happening. And I see a bit of a disconnect between, our Southern counterparts and the non-Indigenous Canadians out there with our Indigenous Canadians as well. So I think, I hope my words can resonate well with other Indigenous youth across Canada who may be feeling some of the same sort of experiences that I experienced growing up.
I think that what you experience growing up in an urban environment, we've all been through it, as almost every Aboriginal person who's lived and walked in a non-native, non-Indigenous society has felt what you went through. I felt it, your mother's felt it, and everybody else that's gone before you was an Indigenous person. And I'm glad in a way that you experience it, because you understand, it makes you understand who you are. It makes you understand what it's all about. And you feel for other people who go through it. And I think it makes you stronger. So I can't say that I'm sorry you went through it, but I am. But I think it makes you a better person to be able to be resilient and get through it. I think as you get older, you become more, you're able to deal with it better and understand it better, and that it's not your fault. So I'm glad you've grown up to be a good person, and you handled it well. I think through you growing up and having to deal with those. Do you have a message for young Inuit that are thinking of pursuing higher education?
Oh, yeah. So obviously, my path is a little different than maybe someone coming from up north because I grew up in Ottawa. And so it may be really intimidating or challenging, to be applying to colleges or university. But if you feel excited and passionate about something and you have a dream or a goal like I did that requires, college or university, I say absolutely go for it. I mean, it's so exciting and fulfilling to pursue a goal and to really reach your full potential. And you are just as deserving as anybody else. And there are bursaries and scholarships and funding out there available. It's just, you just have to look for it. I had to look for it. I had to put in the applications. And yeah, it might be annoying at the time, but it's so worth it. there are barriers, there's challenges, but there are ways to work through it or to overcome those barriers and challenges to get where you want to be. So it's definitely doable. It pays off if you feel that that's what you want to do, because you deserve it. And, our communities are in need of us as leaders of our homes, So it's really empowering and powerful. So I would encourage anybody, even doesn't matter what age you are, to pursue your goals. And if that includes higher education, go for it.
Right on. The last question I want to ask you was, to inspire people, you have to do things, you have to say things to people, young people, especially in Inuit, First Nations, Métis. They're always, in some ways looking for inspiration, and it could come from people like you. Like, you had something to say to these young people, like young Inuit, young First Nations, and Métis. Is there anything that you'd like to say?
I'd like to say that I understand what it feels like to come from a place where you feel like your story and your history and your experiences are unheard, and you feel like they're treated as unimportant by the rest of Canada, and you feel like there's no place for you in, arts and in media and in storytelling, because so often our stories are swept under the rug or they're not given the attention that they deserve. And I want to tell Inuit youth, First Nations youth, Métis youth that absolutely 100% we have a place in media. We've made our place in media. We continue to grow. We continue to flourish and to be so, so successful and so just incredible in the stories that we share, in the experiences that we share, in the art that we share. And, for so long, we were marginalized in media. For so long, we were actively kept out of it. But we've made our own places, and we continue to make our own places. We continue to support one another. Indigenous film and television, Indigenous arts has been one of the most uplifting and supportive spaces that I've ever been in. And I'm so, so grateful to have peers and friends and family who understand the experiences, who are willing to give so much support and to be so uplifting in, supporting me and telling my story, and, creating safer places for Indigenous people to pursue what they dream about, to pursue these careers that, we generally don't think of for ourselves. And so, Indigenous youth, take that opportunity, take that chance, pursue that career. You have a space. There is a space for you. And even if there isn't, if you don't find it right away, make a space for you and continue to pursue it. There are so many people that are willing to support you, that want to support you, that want to see you do well. We as Indigenous creators and artists and media folks, we want to see our own people succeed and continue to push these stories. So pursue it. It's scary, but it's worth it.
But I want to read you something, because this is how it touches my heart for my identity and who I am. So I'm going to read, it's actually almost the last paragraph of my book, that you're referring to before when we were talking. Anyway, this is how I feel. I said, I am first and foremost a Cree woman. It is my identity. The fact that I was born out of wedlock, have been a non-status Indian, a status Indian, a Métis, if we define that as being a mixed blood, and adopted. I've not allowed myself to be defined by any of these labels. Rather, my life has unfolded in a relatively uncomplicated way. Yes, I am a Cree woman, and I'm passionate and optimistic person. It is my hope that this effort that I'm writing about will inspire others to tell their story, because I'm sure there are other people like me, and it's a way to record history. So I just wanted to share that, because I'm so happy that I still know my Cree language and that I am a member, but not having had recognized by the government as a status Indian. Growing up, it had its drawbacks.
about 10 years ago, I had said it would be my dream job to work at a foundation that educates people and builds better relationships between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. And I had no idea Legacy of Hope Foundation existed, and that its mission and mandate was to do just that. So as you can imagine, when I found out about LHF 4 years ago, and I was suggested to apply to that position, I applied and went through the interviews. And when I was successful in getting the position for the foundation, I was so driven to see the foundation expand and succeed, because it was perfectly in line with the vision and dream that I had always wanted to be a part of. So for me, the work I do there isn't work; it's my passion.
It's amazing that it's gone by so fast, doing this. It's like a labor of love, for me anyway. I'm sure it is for you too.
Yeah, it's been incredible.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to come out of each interview.
Yeah. I always get some butterflies, before the interview, but then, once it starts and then just calm down.
And it'll be what it'll be.
Yeah, it'll be what it'll be. Well, I hope you all have enjoyed listening to this particular podcast, and it's in celebration of the 25 years that the Legacy of Hope has been around. And I just, we've done some good work here at the Legacy of Hope Foundation, and we hope to continue for many years to come, educating, teaching Indigenous, non-Indigenous people about Indigenous culture and people. So thank you very much for listening.
Roots and Hoots is a podcast project produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. For episode show notes, please visit the podcast description and make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. For more information about the work we do, please visit legacyofhope.ca.